Hello everybody. My name is Arnold van Iterson. I work at one of the largest leasing companies in the world called LeasePlan. We have almost 2 million vehicles on the road and we operate in 30 countries. I'm a product design lead and I have a clear focus on DesignOps. Before joining LeasePlan, as Brandon said, I teached a bit, but I also had my own web design company for 8 years. And I did a lot of freelancing myself. I'm also a father of 2, so if I have any time left in the day, I try to make some music as well. But it doesn't happen that often. So as said, I have a clear focus on DesignOps, and today I want to take you or tell you about my journey within the DesignOps. So for me, it's a bit of an ongoing adventure. And at the moment, I feel like I'm on track. So I'm not at the finish line yet, but it feels like I'm getting what we're trying to solve. And if you are starting your own DesignOps practice or you're already working on it, I think this talk will help you with some insights to take the next steps as well. And for me, the journey really began when I started freelancing for big corporations. And I ran into a couple of things that really bothered me. Maybe you recognize them yourself as well. So I ran against some challenges. One is because every designer was working on his own project with his own Scrum team. We didn't have clear ways to do alignments, for instance, on tooling or the stuff we were working on. It felt a bit like we were getting to be the new silos. So every Scrum team was doing his own thing. And yeah, we were not aligned on tooling, and it was hard to create like an end-to-end overview of our customer's journey. So maybe we wanted to connect the different products, but because we weren't aligned, it was kind of tough to do so. And another problem was that the feedback wasn't happening. We were not sitting next to each other. So sometimes feedback became a bit harsh or personal because we didn't have a very good relationship with each other. And the impact that the design made and how it was measured didn't resonate with the rest of the company. So at around 2017, I started stopping complaining and start doing something about it. So I took a course at Hyper Island called Leading Teams in the Digital Age. And it really touched me or introduced me with the concept of playbooks, how you can template certain approaches, but also how it explained me how team dynamic works. So what happens if you have a dynamic team, people come and go, so what does it do to a team and the dynamics of that team. And soon after that, I started looking also for a mentor. And I was really lucky to find Dave Malouf. Probably if you're interested in this subject, you already know him. He's one of the key people behind the DesignOps movement, and he really helped me getting into the right mindset. And he was a great sparring partner when I was trying to put things in motion. Most of the time, he was already at LeasePlan. Yeah, he was a good mentor. Who I could talk to, and also started reading. So one of the books he wrote was DesignOps Handbook. I think at the same time, Org Design for Design Orgs came out, and all those things, all those type of information I was trying to combine to fit into one framework. I had all these different ideas about design and operations, and I really need a way to put it all in context. So then I came across the term operating system, and for me that description matched my need. And I think it's also a term that resonates with people. And I used the article of Niels and Norman Group, the DesignOps 101, as a first grouping of all the things that would be that would make up this design operating system. And then to give you some guidance, the Niels and Norman Group, they talk about 3 different tracks. So on one hand, you have how we work together, how we get our work done, and how our work creates impact. So that's also the basic structure of this talk. So first step, how we work together. This is the team at LeasePlan. Even it was the team before Corona, so yeah, we could all sit this close to each other. And I think it's a great mix of product designers, researchers, and service designers. And together we work on multiple journey teams, and each journey could host multiple products. And as a design teams, our core focus is creating an end-to-end experience. So to give a bit more context about the team, the product designers are decentralized, so they really work in the Scrum teams. The researcher is more like supporting. So if a team needs to do research, they get all the support they need. But the research also looks overarching. So what's happening besides that team, or can we link teams to next to each other? And service design is really focusing on the end-to-end experience, supporting us with experiments, see how we can learn to set up new products as well. One good tip for if you look at the design team like this, only 2 people in this picture are here for more than 2 years. So it's really something to keep in the back of your mind. It's really like an infinite game. People come and people go. So you need a clear operating system that you can easily explain to new people. Otherwise, you run into things like you thought you agreed upon, and then realizing that, oh, it was with a different group of people. So you have to sometimes, I actually had to redo some stuff sometimes because I forgot to explain it to the new people. So that's a bit of a key problem with decentralized teams. So it's about the collaboration and the alignment, and how are we handling overarching things like tooling and principles. It's for me something I work on a daily basis at. So how do we align the things that are not team specific, but we have to do as a group? To better work with this, I'm a big fan of this visualization. And for me, it's a perfect illustration for a manager. So what you actually do is that you agree or try to agree with your team what you're going to be working on, but not go to the solution mode yet. So it's more of creating like what do we want to accomplish as a team, and then see who can contribute to what or to which part. And we decide on this content together. So we created a Kanban board and a backlog with all different items we as a team think we should work on. And from there, we created OKRs, and also during the one-on-one meetings, these are the topics we work on. So that is one of the first things we did when setting up the DesignOps operation. Of course, working as a team, collaboration is a key thing. It's all about collaboration and rituals. So within LeasePlan, our key event is every Thursday. That's our weekly design meeting. And we use this moment to share what has been going on in the past week and discuss 1 or 2 bigger topics. Most of the time doing it by a design critique. And for me, the check-ins is really something I introduced at LeasePlan, because I was working within other companies, and those team meetings could be quite chaotic. So especially at the beginning, like everybody's happy to see each other. Well, actually, most of the time, not always, of course. And it could be a hectic start of a meeting. Not everybody in the right mindset. So that's why I introduced these check-ins. It's a technique I learned at Hyper Island. And it's basically you ask one question, and one by one, each participant answers this question. So to give an example, what I sometimes do is I draw a big roller coaster, and I ask everybody just to draw himself where do they fit within this image. And to give you an example, like maybe sometimes you're excited, everything is going well, so you draw you in the circle of the looping. But other times it's like you're more at the beginning, like you're climbing, but you think you're gaining speed, and probably next week you will really hit it off. And I think a metaphor in this way is a good way to, or a great way to open up. It's way easier to express yourself, and you feel less vulnerable. And it's actually also affect the check-ins, engage people to speak up more during the rest of the meeting as well. Because you already spoke once, so you feel more free to speak again. This improves the outcome of the overall meeting. So I've got multiple examples. So every week I try to ask a different question, so we can start a meeting in a good pace. So one of the other things I really enjoy is doing a design critique. As mentioned before, giving feedback is something that can be challenging. It can be brutal, it can be too delicate, something in between. And because I really wanted to fix this, I took some time to find the right structure. And I think we're getting there with the current group of people. I recently found this quote, and for me, this is actually how I see this type of meeting. So the design critiques, it's actually starting with some preparation for the person who wants some feedback. So if you want proper feedback, you really need to set the stage. I personally think the review constraints in this example is one of the best questions to answer up front, because this really filters out the obvious feedback you will get, saving both time and frustration. So when everything is set, and within the design meeting, we use this feedback capture grid to capture all the feedback. So sometimes if it's a big topic, we take like maybe 15 minutes, so everybody just can write down on a sticky note his thoughts, take some time really to think about it. And by grouping it in these categories, it's also easier for the presenter to harvest like all the feedback and get back to this desk and work with it. And next to this feedback session, we also just use Slack to like quickly get some feedback. And I think this is going really well at the moment. Like a lot of chat is happening, people sharing screens, and you really can see the type of feedback and the quality of the feedback improving. Another key thing about team dynamics is onboarding. So the easy part is, just create a checklist and like, okay, invite people to the right information, to the right meetings, to the right Slack channels, send them the right information. So just create a checklist will save you a lot of time. The tricky part for me on onboarding is how do you on one hand make somebody feel welcome, and on the other end, like if it's a senior designer, tell them how we are working in our organization, because most of the time these are people that know how to design. They've done it for a while, so who are you to tell them what to do? So I had a chat about it with Dave one time, and he showed me this model, and that really helped me getting into the right mindset. So this is quite maybe a bit much detail. So the key thing is, you have to be clear how you operate. Otherwise, you might end up in situations where people start using different tools to design or prototype, making it harder to combine different designs if you want to create an end-to-end experience. So the onboarding part is really about like telling, okay, this is what we do, this is the tools we use. This is actually how we operate. And when you move to more like a daily way of working, it's more about like the participating part, selling, and not so much the telling part. And just this picture really helped me getting my story across. Now, we also have some other rituals. And the first thing we do is making research happen. So we noticed in the past that it's very easy to caught up in your daily work. And that's why once a quarter, every designer has a meeting with the research team. And we use the time to actually look back at the research that happened and talk about new research questions that live inside that team. So keeping the focus all year round research, like a clear cadence to do proper research. We're planning to do the same thing with service design. In this case, the reason is more to keep the to focus on the end-to-end experience, making sure designers step out of their team bubble and look like how everything is connected. Next up is how we get our work done. So Standardize is one of the key things in this area. As mentioned before, within LeasePlan, we're pushing for this end-to-end experience. And sometimes we need to be able to stitch all multiple designs together to create a compelling storyline for stakeholders. For instance, to highlight a certain experience gap between two products. This is one of the rules I try to live by. So reaching that throughout a consistent toolset. So the toolset is not like you have to do everything that's out there, but it's more like if you do a certain thing, this is how we do it. So actually what I'm trying to create is more of a sandbox model for design. So it should be a safe place where you can play around and you have specific toys that are available and you can play together and you can create things. And once in a while, people will bring new toys and it will change how we operate. But the setup is sort of fixed. Now, during the design process, we create a lot of different artifacts. And this could be workshops, templates, or other things that support our way of working. And I recently started to collect all these initiatives and sorting them by from like vision level, so the highest level, so the plane in this case, all the way down to implementation. And because Confluence we use Confluence to document a lot of things, and it can become very big over time, especially on team level. So I also added a column in this overview to tell designers where to store their input, making it easier for other people to find specific information. Otherwise, every team has its own way of storing things, and then if you switch teams or you quickly need to find some information is within another team, where to find it. So harmonize is the next topic. Let me zoom in a bit. So on one hand, we use our design system to create a shared understanding between the design and the front end. So in our case, it means that we have a sketch library and a portal with documentation and a React library full of components. And I think this is a great tool to use also for your critique to, so 1 second. That supports your feedback. Makes it easier to say like, hey, I see you created a new component, but we already have something like that. Can you tell me about the reason why you took a different approach? So document this in a proper way will really help you with that feedback in the long term. And it makes, of course, it's great for consistency throughout your products. And it also supports teams without designers. So we have a couple of teams in different countries, so we support different countries, and they have sometimes they hire companies to do something for them. So in this case, we want to support them with the right tools so they can stay within the design of the global experience. And it's also a great tool for onboarding new designers. So they can really go through the design system, getting a better feeling what the brand is like, what the interaction is like, how we develop stuff. So all key benefits of a design system. And like most modern companies, LeasePlan is also becoming more data-driven by day. And it's important that this data is accessible to support decision making. So that's why we built a repository for user research data that's accessible for everyone. And it contains research done not only by the digital department, but also reports created by others, like specific country reports, stuff like that. So we try to actually harvest everything in one place, make it searchable, and do our benefit with it. Our work creates impact. So one of the things we do to create awareness within our organization is to share snippets of insights throughout different channels. So one way to do this is via our Slack channel. So most of the time, if research is done, we just post little snippets out there. Or another way, we have some company events, like a Monday morning stand-up. This is also a great way to share what you accomplish as a team. And another thing we measure is when we test a prototype, we also include a system usability scale, so we can measure the solution, how the solution performs on this topic. And this is especially helpful for products we test often. So it creates an insight on how things change after each iteration, and and most important, if the change was good or not. So you can slowly see the needle moving, knowing that you're on the right track, knowing supporting your customer. And next to that, we also created a maturity model. It's based upon a couple of models that already exist, like the one from the Envision and the Nielsen-Norman group. But we personally felt like we wanted to create our own as well, that fit our personal need. So this is what you're looking at is actually the first iteration. In this case, the colors represent different teams. I just removed the team names for now. And we actually defined 5 maturity levels and 6 key dimensions. And this overview shows the maturity per dimension. So a team maturity level is determined on having all dimensions covered. So to give an example, the orange team has an awareness that is scalable, but planning and research practice is still project-based. Therefore, the maturity level of the team is still set at project-based. So one of the key benefits of this visualization is the ability to see the different maturities per subject for each team. And as a manager, this helps me to identify the opportunities, like which team is performing well on which topic, and so I can share their knowledge with the other teams, improving the overall maturity of the design team. It could also mean, I'm going to skip that. So, key takeaway of this presentation, how we work together, it's really about creating a safe environment where your team feels free to share and participate. It's really a team effort, and it's your job as a lead to facilitate this participation. Within how we get our work done, it's all about standardization as much as possible and focus on reuse. And if you talk about impact, it's about measure your output and improve all maturity by sharing knowledge. So if you want to start tomorrow with your next step in your design ops, I would say grab the framework from Nielsen-Norman. So that was DesignOps 101. Put it in a table and brain dump all the actions next to it. Put it in a backlog and just start doing it. That concludes my presentation. Don't see any chat, so I'm going to open it.
Awesome, thank you, Arnold. That was fantastic. For me, I really like the roller coaster and the activity you do with the team. Perhaps it hits a little bit close to home at the moment, but I think that's something that we could all take, whether with a design ops team or otherwise. We have several questions for you here, so I'm going to maybe pick out 1 or 2 for you to answer now, and then we can put the rest into the chat so you can address them that way. You talked a little bit about some of the turnover and how you have to be prepared for that. So somebody asked, what have you done to reduce the risks with turnover on the design team? And if people do turnover, how do you make sure that knowledge is passed on to the new team members that are coming on?
Good question. Thanks for asking. I think the key thing is the structure within Confluence. So if you're doing a workshop or something else, make sure you store it in the right location. Because I've seen a lot of pre-work that has been done by designers, and then they leave and you think you will reuse it again, and it's actually not the case. So yeah, it's really about making sure you focus on the right output and make sure that you store that in the right place. So it's really easy to find for other designers that take over. I don't have a really specific example of that, to be honest.
No, it's a great answer. And I'll ask one more here from Jake. So it's a broad question, but maybe you can give us one idea here. He's curious to know about the role of measurement for the DesignOps practice. So maybe what's one of the metrics that you keep track of for the effectiveness of your DesignOps team?
We're actually in the middle of setting it up a bit more professional. So one of the things we looked at is the heart model from Google. So it's happiness, engagement, and some other topics, and combine it actually with the data team and the CRO team. So it's really, I think that's the key thing. So it's not a design thing, it's a cross collaboration, and you really have to find each other in that. And yeah, for me, it's also on our side, making sure that you're also doing the qualitative research as well. Otherwise, it tends to become more like only A/B testing and stuff like that. And for me to get the full story, you need other research as well. So yeah, start talking to your peers and do it as a group assessment. For me, that's the way to do it.
Fantastic. And maybe I'll just ask one more quick one because the questions are coming in fast here. Somebody would like to, Luigi would like to know, do you use both design critiques and retrospectives?
Honest answer is only design critique, and the other stuff is on the roadmap, but we didn't do it yet. But it's indeed a key thing to do. So we do have like once or twice a year, more like a breakout day with the design team. So then we do a big retrospective. Actually, yes, we did. Now I think about it, it's been a while. I think it was December we had the last one. We did a bit, like one big, but it's not like all the other stuff is more of a written thing. So it's really planned, and now because of Corona probably it's not on my radar anymore, but thanks for the reminder. I will plan the next session.
Good. It sounds like you learned something too. So thanks again, Arnold. I'm going to put the rest of the questions into the Q&A module so you can take a look at them there and maybe have a chat with some of those folks that asked them. Thank you for everyone who submitted a question. And next, we're going to get started on our second presentation, which is from Mackenzie Browne. And as a quick introduction, Mackenzie works at Elsevier as a senior full stack developer. So of course, his talk is going to be particularly interesting to the technology audience here, as he focuses on full stack and mobile development. His talk is going to be about keeping your design system bug-free and up-to-date, even while under constant iteration. Specifically, he will discuss snapshot testing as an approach to accomplishing this. So thank you, Mackenzie, and please take it away.
Thanks for that great intro. You can hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Cool. So hi, my name's Mackenzie. I'm a full stack developer. I'm originally from Toronto, and I moved here to Amsterdam back in October. I'm here today to speak to you a little bit about visual snapshot testing and how it can help you, either building a new design system or strengthening an existing one. I'm also going to give a little bit of an introduction on what visual snapshots are and why they're important. Okay, so to begin, what is visual testing? First, let's start with the problem. So what I experience quite often is designers don't often get a very clear picture into the development process as it's happening. Feedback usually happens at the end, just before you're about to launch a new feature, or even sometimes after. Think about the scenario where code's already been merged and deployed, but you find visual problems. Another update is required to push and fix them. Depending on your company's development process, sometimes pushing an update like this just for a few visual changes becomes low priority. And this process can quickly become very slow. Next, Many companies use technology like React and Bootstrap to build your apps fast. New versions come out, and then there's always hesitation to update. If there are no problems, why risk creating new ones? Even if you don't use lots of fancy frameworks, the same problem can occur with in-house built UIs. When it comes to making a change to a generic button or input box, these quickly become the most difficult elements to change in your app because of the amount of manual visual testing that needs to happen to verify it. This can lead to visual changes quickly becoming neglected, issues can quickly build up and become hard to maintain, and then the next thing you know, design changes end up coming in the form of a major redesign instead of small incremental changes over time. Okay, so let's talk about what we would want in our solution. Wouldn't it be nice if designers could review every visual change similar to how developers review every code change? For me, this is the most important feature because I hear a lot about designers and project managers wanting this type of insight, but not being able to get it. Also, designers don't generally want to put the entire development environment on their computer just to see a few visual changes. Next, being able to perform major, high-impact updates with confidence. Take away the guesswork when you deploy new elements to your UI and be confident that nothing will go wrong after you deploy. Companies generally have staging servers, but it would still be nice to see every visual change incremented and isolated from all the other changes that are coming with new development. With this, we should be able to catch problems quicker, in result, making them easier to fix. Okay, so visual testing can accomplish this. How it works is while you're running automated tests, you actually take an image screenshot of your website in different states. So this can actually include desktop, mobile, multiple views, different operating systems. Really, you can take it as far as you like. Then the next time the change is made, the test records a new screenshot and checks to see if there's any differences. If there are, the testing tool will notify you, and then at that point, the change can be quickly reviewed and either approved or rejected before the change gets deployed. On the next few slides, I'll show you a working example of that and how exactly this would look. Okay. So let's see what it actually looks like when I change code that affects the UI. In this example, you'll see that the top image, it's a dialog box with action buttons. And in the bottom image, you'll see I moved the close button, the little X, over by about 50 pixels. Then the middle image actually shows you the changes highlighted while the rest of the image is grayed out. As a developer, I can honestly say most normal automated tests don't check for things like this. They mostly focus on functionality. If they do, it's usually in the form of a test failure and it's not usually clear what's wrong. I'll show what I'm talking about in a minute. These types of visual diffs can happen every time the code is changed and can automatically validate itself if no visual changes occur. If something does change, these types of automated tests will fail and catch the problem before it really becomes a problem. At this point, you can start using these tests as a part of your review process and give you extra confidence that the UI didn't change, even if the code did. Okay, so if any developers are listening, they're probably at the point right now asking, why do I need visual snapshots? I've been using code snapshots for years. And for anyone who's unaware, code snapshots, essentially very similar to an image screenshot, but it takes a picture of your raw HTML after React has been processed, after any of your UI libraries have been added, very similar to what you get when you right-click on anywhere in Chrome and click View Source. It'll take a picture of that, and then same thing. It will compare it to the new version and see if any changes have been made. So take a look at the example. It's very easy to tell what changed from the picture above. It's right there. The button has moved. The code snapshot underneath, all you can really see is that a class has changed, and now further investigation actually needs to be made. The code snapshot gives you more insight of what changed in the code, while the visual snapshot gives you an insight of what changed visually. The combination together gives both the developer and the designer the tools they need to better communicate with each other. All right, so just for a minute, in my example, I used a testing tool called Cypress and a visual testing tool called Percy, but the tech really doesn't matter here. At this point, easy out-of-the-box solutions are available for most tools that do integration tests. Some of them are paid services where you get a little bit more. Others are free and open source where they offer a little bit less, but in return, they allow you the ability to customize it for your needs. In the end, I ended up picking the tools that I chose because I have previous experience with them. And the tool doesn't really matter. I really want to emphasize that. The goal is to easily get screenshots of your code during each change. Use whatever tool can help you get to this goal. For the most part, if you have existing integration tests, these type of snapshots are really easy to set up. For me, it took less than 15 minutes to set up and do an evaluation on a project that I already had tests in. Okay, so here you can see an example of how you can use these tests in your tools. If a visual change occurs, designers can do a visual review in the same step while developers are doing their technical review. We can set it up so new code isn't approved until the visuals have been approved as well. This means designers can actually block code from being merged if there are major problems. So for me, this is huge as a developer because fixing things closer to when I originally developed them is by far the best and easiest way for me to fix bugs. If the change doesn't happen now, it's very likely it might never happen. This is especially true if your company follows strict processes around sprints and work items. Minor additional changes like these after a merge is often considered a separate work item and could be scheduled 2 weeks in the future or even later. In that time, myself as a developer loses context, and when it does come time to come back to this change, it takes longer because I need to refamiliarize myself with the code. Even worse, in larger companies, this work could be assigned to a completely different developer, requiring them to familiarize themselves with the code for the first time, which takes even longer. Having this type of quality gate won't only save you time, but it will also improve the quality of your app overall. So just in this test, you can see all my functional tests have worked, and then this green snapshot this red X at the top shows that one visual change still needs to be reviewed before this code can be deployed. And down here, this is sort of an example of what you can expect to see in a visual review tool. I have a few different options here. I can see different screen sizes, different browsers, and the images you'll actually see are the ones that I had a few slides ago with the different images and then the changes actually highlighted. Oh. All right, so let's look at some other real world use cases. Package upgrades. This often gets neglected with the sense of if it isn't broken, don't fix it. This can quickly lead to packages going out of date and then becoming a bigger maintenance issue later down the line. So in this screenshot on the right, you'll see a regular GitHub status checker of a normal pull request. The X's represent failing tests, the yellow represents tests that are still running, and the green check mark is for passing tests. The bottom purple logo represents the tool we're using for our visual tests. So what this means is that all the visual tests passed, even though some of the underlying functionality still may have bugs. This is a pretty common case. If you upgrade something like React or another library that maybe doesn't touch your visuals, The visuals can stay unaffected, but buttons or other events could stop working. I think this is especially useful because it means as long as no visual changes occur, the design review is done at this point. Everything's already rendering the way it's expected, so the developer can go and fix their bugs, and as long as those visual changes continue to stay the same, the designer can sign off on this work for now, before the functionality work is even complete. Only if visual changes occur will the designer need to intervene and review any changes. Cool. The next scenario, making deliberate changes to your components. Making changes to your input boxes or common buttons that are used across your entire site can sometimes be scary. Anything that's used in many places can have a huge impact. Also, edge cases can easily get missed. For example, if someone changes a little bit of white space due to margins or padding, changes like this can easily be missed by a human. Similar to updating an external package in the last step, you can make a global change and almost immediately know what effect it's going to have across your entire app. It means you can make a change like this with confidence, but it also helps you understand when you shouldn't, or when a change just isn't ready yet. Okay, last example. It's by far the most boring, but I think it's still very important. Visual snapshots are there for you every day in every step of the development process, whether it's new features, maintenance, deliberate changes, or unexpected ones. Visual snapshots are an extra way to, or an extra check mark in your sign-off process that provides lots of value without adding a lot of friction. Another great thing that comes out of this is accountability. With every visual change that gets approved, there's a complete record of every decision and evaluation that was made. Even with all of these tools, visual verifications are manually done. So this means sometimes things can get approved by accident. With a log of visual snapshots, you can pinpoint exactly when that change occurred and when it was approved. For me, this is really important because tracing back to when the change happened really helps me find the code that I need to fix it. This can save a lot of time. All right, to summarize, I believe in a lot of ways, your user experience can be perceived as the overall quality of your brand. Would Apple have ever seemed like a futuristic company focused on detail and quality if they had a lot of design inconsistencies? Inconsistent user experiences can also lead to unwanted appearances that cause lack of trust in your user. They could be thinking that they're using a fake website, for example. It could also lead to less customers in sales overall. That's why visual testing is so important, because it can prevent mistakes like these. If you are visual testing already, great. If you aren't, I would seriously recommend looking into it. The setup is pretty minimal and the benefits are enormous. In my opinion, visual testing is important and should be considered a mandatory part of every modern app development process. Cool, that's all I have. Thanks for listening. Hope you like what you hear. And yeah, feel free to follow me on the web. You can pretty much find me as Mac Browne anywhere. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Mackenzie. That was great. And thank you for putting in a demo. I think that helped to visualize, if you will, some of what you were describing. If you're ready for some questions, there's one here. So this person asking the question has a large code base that has never had any visual tests as part of it. Assuming that they only have capacity to implement one at a time, should they prioritize code or visual snapshots?
Personally, I would do both at the same time. So the reason I'm saying that is because for the most part, if you do use some of these out-of-the-box tools, it's one line of code that you need to add to your existing integration tests. So you can actually add a code snapshot in the same place with some of these tools. So it's the idea of either adding one line of code or two lines of code. if you've found where you want to add it, you may as well just do both at the same time. The other thing is, like I mentioned in the talk, they do cover different things. You can have visual changes where the code changed underneath, but you can also have no visual changes. You can also have visual changes. Oh, sorry, I'm getting mixed up. You can have visual changes where the code changes underneath, but you can also have code changes underneath that don't change visuals at all. So I think they're both important and they work together.
Fantastic. And the ambition, just do both of them. I like that. We have another question here that this person would like to know about your potential experience in convincing non-technical managers to adopt visual testing. Have you had to experience that, or what would you recommend folks to do when talking to their non-technical managers?
I think to be honest, I think a proof of concept goes a long way. If you already have existing integration tests, yeah, seriously, it's going to take only a few minutes to at least get a few examples up and running. At that point, you can take that to management, make either a subtle change or a really deliberate one, and show how the system kind of catches it. The other thing is, if you're looking into something like this, or you think this might provide value, you probably already have examples or experiences in the past where this already could have helped. I think all of those things can really help convince non-technical people. More than that though, I think showing the visual diff with actual images goes a long way too.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you, Mackenzie. We're going to get our last but not least speaker set up here, and I will introduce him. So we've got Constantine Gavrykov coming up next. Constantine is the Global UX Director at Intersport, where I think some of us might have been shopping over the work from home period for dumbbells and yoga mats and other items. But before Intersport, Constantine worked at Wargaming, which is a video game company, and that's inspired his talk today. It was at Wargaming that he learned what was required in having a DesignOps mindset, or how to make it second nature within the organization. Constantine, please take it away.
Thanks a lot, Brendan, for introducing me. Can you confirm if you can hear me well and all good?
I can hear you, yes.
Great. Let me share the screen. Can you see the screen, guys?
We can.
Okay. So, hi. Hope you all enjoying the night so far, and the great talks by Mac and Arnold. Really lots of insights. Happy to share the stage with them. And special thanks to Rangle for inviting me actually to share my view on DesignOps. I hope that I will bring a slightly different perspective to the table. I like to talk about the basics and as well, probably kind of like more on the motivational and inspirational side of things. As Brandon said, at the moment I am purely engaged with e-commerce and the world of conversion, but there have been times that I think are way more relevant for us today, because I want to talk about building and growing a culture of design in a completely distributed environment, pretty much which resonates with our current situation. So let's dive in. Why this topic? From my perspective, as a designer, as a strategist, and as a leader, as someone who is expected to take our digital products and customer experience through all possible and impossible challenges that our business is facing, DesignOps is something I spend a lot of time thinking about every single day. So designing and redesigning org, as we were scaling up, has proven to be a quite difficult task. And here, I want to talk about the DesignOps and advantages, challenges, and specifics of the process. But before that, let's agree on the definitions. Once again, the beloved by the audience, Norman Nielsen Group definition. I hope actually this one is not too simplistic. I kind of trust the definition over here. DesignOps refers to the orchestration and optimization of people, processes, and craft in order to amplify design's value and impact at scale. In my personal opinion, depending on the context, depending on the company, and depending on the setup, it might be a responsibility of a dedicated person, a group of people, or as in our case, for instance, it was driven, or it is driven by design leadership, but utilized and supported by every single team member. Another important factor here is distributed environment. Distributed team, it's a group of people working together on the same projects, but situated in different locations. Basically, everyone in our industry at this very moment. So outside of quarantine, it's important to understand that even if one person out of all is remote, we're dealing with a distributed team. My team is called SILI, IDEA. It stands for In-House Design Agency. It helps with the internal marketing. On the other hand, it's just fun. And we've got all possible and impossible cases over there. Guys working from different offices, others that work from their homes or co-working spaces, and people that are employed full-time or freelancers that do contribute on a part-time basis. All the people were based and are based in Paris, Berlin, Amsterdam, Kyiv, and Minsk. Main responsibility of the team is to cover ecosystem of services surrounding games, and it would be something that covers the entire player or user journey from acquisition to retention to community and customer support. But later in the history of this team, we also picked up the design of the games themselves, because it quickly started to be obvious that to create the really seamless customer journey, you need to introduce the experience and you need to introduce the design system that is going to be shared. So why in the first place we made it? And the focus became on DesignOps. Within the last decade, the user base of Wargaming was growing rapidly. And thanks to the interest from different parts of the world, like North America, Asia, and Africa, these users appeared to have absolutely different cultural biases, mentality, and user habits, which led to a company opening 21 additional office actually, to serve local markets better. Nevertheless, for a long time, efficiency and success of these offices was difficult to achieve, as most of the decisions and solutions were created by a certain team, which was centrally located and didn't take into account local specifics. So in other words, our reasoning was, number one, we needed an understanding of users with different cultural backgrounds and habits. Number two, we needed to find a way to improve collaboration with regional offices and increase quality of different solutions, which required better alignment, shared design language, and last but not least, operational excellence. And number three, of course, that was on everybody's agenda. When you deal with such a dynamic environment as massive multiplayer online gaming, speed to value is basically essential. So here's the story of one team striving to do the best work. This is the story of our challenges, risks, and limitations that we faced along the way. To give it a bit more structure, I'm going to cover it in 5 groups that are pretty much mirror classic organizational management: composition, coordination, collaboration, communication, and culture. Actually, Arnold noticed that all start with C's. That was not intentional. Nevertheless, maybe it would help somebody to remember that. And surely all of these 5 groups are very exaggerated due to the distributed complexity. So, number 1, team composition. Team composition sets the foundation for everything, from internal dynamics and motivation to performance and quality of the work being delivered. Hiring right people that believe in what we do, not just need a job, was always paramount for me personally. That's why I always invested in the first interview around 70% of my time to literally talk about us and what we believe in. I would be sitting there and telling about our work, what we've done it, why we've done it, what values do we have, what process do we follow, and I'm trying to make sure that the person on the other side gets a realistic picture before even going further in the interview process. It is extremely important that the team is composed of the right people, right for the context, of course, like workload and tasks and the company and the rest of the team that is already being present over there. Many are unfortunately simply not ready and feel out of their comfort zone due to isolation. Virtual team or distributed team work requires high self-regulation, self-motivation, and in general, high autonomy and discipline. As the entire team is supposed to work according to the common timeline and without any delays, ask for help if needed. Remote work, once again, that's my personal opinion, is not suited for people that used to be micromanaged. Nowadays, we're all equalized, so the situation is slightly different, but in an ideal case scenario. Soft versus hard skills. It might sound surprising, but strong communication skills is a must. If the person is not ready to spend multiple hours per day in video calls, it's gonna become a problem very soon. Besides building strong, good relationships with the rest of the team without physical face-to-face presence, it might be also a struggle. Obviously, I'm not preaching that everybody should be the master of soft skills. It is more important for the key people in the team when expectations from supporting roles might be slightly different. Regarding the hard skills and a level, in our case, the ratio is 60 to 40% senior folks to mid and junior level designers. And to ensure that despite locations and titles and new people joining the team, we designed a shared competence matrix and a clear career growth path and development path being pushed through that. Here you can see some sections defining skills by sub areas, from product design to user experience to research, visual design, and direction. And every role and level has a benchmark that's visible for the leadership team, but every person, him or herself, gone through the entire matrix and defined where they are and what needs to be improved, again, kind of like from their personal standpoint. The beauty of it is that you do not impose evaluation on people from top down, or for instance, like from around. Using this simple framework, people do it themselves. So senior or not, every effective structure requires coordination. Size as well, of course, as the level depend on what kind of task the team is engaged in and the internal structure. In general, the overall size of, let's put it this way, the team that proved to be effective is under 10, including people that the team is collaborating with. And that's why when we passed the mark of 15 people in our department, so-called, like, so I wouldn't call it a team anymore, we started to experiment with the concept of sub-teams and often rotation of people so that everyone would have a chance to work with everyone else over time. I'll talk about the sub-teams later and our setup as well. With the bigger size of the department or team, communication becomes complicated and makes building close relationships and mutual trust between team members more difficult. Distance definitely doesn't help. So regarding coordination, I would definitely lie if I say that coordination of 50 people spread across 5 locations and even a wider amount of business stakeholders and development teams that we are working with on a daily basis is an easy task. Coordination is the part that we are constantly fine-tuning and experimenting with. For instance, within the last years, we've tried a model with a strict hierarchical structure. UX and creative directors, leads, seniors, then middle and junior designers. But it quickly led to extremely high operational workload on our directors and leads, while the rest of the team has lost any kind of initiative and independence. We've also tried moving the balance on the side of design delivery managers. It's a special role that was introduced within the design department, whose responsibility lies within the time, scope, and budget. And that model, as it appears, led us to the very well organized conveyor production without a chance for innovation and new ideas whatsoever at all. What do you see on the slide? That's a visual representation of how the process looked like before. And by the way, it's a real clicker game that one of our guys created as a fun project, which kind of gave me a hint that we've got a problem and it needs to be solved. Lastly, we've settled with a couple of practices that seem to work for us the best. Sub-teams accountability that I mentioned before. And in sub-teams, all the lights are on the team and it's every single member over there. So instead of waiting for the push from above, the team solves all the questions within and being accountable for all decisions made, including timeline, what methodology is being used, when are we going to do the usability testing, whether we need to perform extensive research, and so on and so on. While user experience director and design leads set general direction, and along the way being engaged, but being engaged by sub-team when they feel the need for it. To make it work, roles and priorities should be clearly defined from the very beginning. Who is being involved, who can make the calls, and what to do in case of a conflict. Besides that, the biggest step for all of us in the leadership team was to let it go, really. Give teams the chance to fail and provide them required space for finding their own solutions without us standing behind and supervising. User experience director and design leads would work more on a high level, defining overall strategy and focusing on product lines, services of 10 to 20 that are being a part of every game's ecosystem, while design delivery manager, as you can see on this infographic, surrounds everyone and ensures a framework that supports such environment, which obviously requires quite a lot of collaboration. A couple of words about common rules that allow us to work and collaborate effectively. First, it's time when every team member should be available. I know it's obvious, but it is anyway good to go through these basics and put them out there for everybody to understand. Especially when you work remote and sometimes across the time zones, it assumes particular freedom. Nevertheless, for the efficient collaboration, it is important to have agreed hours for this intersection. Second one, and probably most important for us in terms of boosting speed to value, is a skill-based, not availability-based approach. I know it's not your usual way of doing things. Let me explain why it worked. You would try to form a sub-team based on what kind of skills will be needed at a particular time or phase the product is in, instead of who is available right now or who is geographically based next to the stakeholders. So therefore, a lot of our products and projects are done by design teams of 5 to 7 folks, like designers and researchers, in which case one of them wears hat of a product designer and is constantly assigned to this particular product. She would know like where the product is coming from, what's the status right now, and where is it going from, where is it going to. So basically ensure the entire communication with the product team and be a part of that, kind of can live and breathe with them. And she as well is responsible for indicating what kind of additional disciplines are required, from researcher to someone who is an expert in transitions and animations, for instance. And these guys might be involved for just 10% of their time, but nevertheless, it allows us to increase final quality dramatically and also deliver way faster. So talking about the process, it's simple. I believe in the first place that the process is something very well defined. but flexible, something that keeps designers busy, focusing on their work, finding the problems and coming up with the design solutions instead of figuring out like how to work and what to do. I think Arnold actually mentioned something similar to that as well. But to ensure, we came up with one global unified design process. And in fact, it's an extremely detailed set of documents describing all possible steps, methodologies, and roles involved that we might need when approaching product design and development, especially including external roles as well, from engineers to the stakeholders and so on. Each step has a clear definition, input and outcome, and what should happen along the way. Then it's a responsibility of the sub-team together to decide what exactly from that process is going to be used. It also gives us a chance to be way more transparent with anyone we collaborate with. Transparency and trust, therefore, are important parts of collaboration. I wanted to cover a couple of topics around that, especially about performance. When you cannot see a real person present in a room, the dilemma arises: how to measure performance when you're not in close vicinity. When you're collocated, you naturally see how much time a person spends in the office. You can kind of like evaluate how busy she is, and in general, see how active and engaged she is. But when remote, we tend to focus on results, speed, and quality. But what's important not to overlook is how did we or the sub-team get to the result. We look how effective collaboration was, and if the team managed to develop healthy relationships and not kill each other along the way, which is the common case in some projects as well. Helpful practice among our directors and leads is to pay close attention along the way, to analyze behavior, and most importantly, constantly make notes during the meetings and demos and any other encounters like workshops or brainstorming sessions, to help us keep track, as usually memory fades away and leaves only the recent happenings intact. So these notes would help building a good picture of a person or a team over time that you can get back to anytime you need. And to further increase transparency and trust, especially with external teams, we came up with a practice that every team member has an internal portfolio within the company, which contains case studies of their previously done work. Those would usually highlight the process, the challenges faced, and particular KPIs achieved, so that you might get to know who you're working with even before you start. What you see on the screen is a portfolio of our art director, which in essence is way more visual than, for instance, case studies of our user experience designers and research folks. Of course, it is also helpful because in a lot of cases, especially in video gaming, projects are not going to be released for a long time, so they wouldn't see the light and get feedback from the external audience. So it is good for the designers as well, to practice their muscle and be happy sharing it at least like with 4,500 people that work for the same company. Fourth pillar, communication. I believe in over-communicating when working remotely, but it requires a lot of attention to staying on top of the things. And to ensure that we have a set of well-defined routines around what channel is used and for what context. For instance, when to jump on a video call, or when you should use an email or chat instead. And in addition, there are norms that everyone is expected to follow. Prepare an agenda before the meeting and a follow-up with action points or discussed questions after. Everybody knows that. I know, guys, this is basics, but again, kind of like recall the meetings that you had today. How many of them followed that? Absolutely crucial rule is a rule of no multitasking, especially when you are sitting in front of your screen and having a video call. It's very tempting, to grab your mouse, grab your keyboard, write an email, do something on the screen when you're not engaged. But for us, the rule is that during the discussion with everyone, you should be mentally present and involved. Otherwise, you're not supposed to be there at all. To support that, transparency and over communication, we as well introduced a bit of an extreme practice on the flat side of organizations, no closed doors. Literally, all the meetings are open and visible for everyone within the team, including strategic sessions, planning, budget discussions, etc. The funny thing, the call came from below, so team was asking for that. But after we've done it, they rarely use that. And besides, to support environment of building and sustaining good relationships, we use a couple of rituals as well. Referring to Arnold's ones, I guess we have this in common. So daily stand-ups for updates and keeping everyone informed. There will be other stand-ups with the product teams as well, but along the way. So that everybody knows what's going on ideally. And every week inner circle meeting for more detailed updates related to current work, results, and life of the team in general. So once again, over communicating is better than the other way around. Last out of 5, culture. Culture is literally about every aspect of our work, from the way we talk, vocabulary we use, to the way we create. And it's important maybe to address not just the culture of the company and expect everybody inheriting it, but the culture within the team as well. Simon Sinek says, for instance, that people have a strong feeling of belonging and deliver better results when they feel and they understand not just what we do, but why we do that. And in my opinion, designers are highly egocentric. But at the same time, they require a strong set of values that they would want to believe in. For instance, making a difference, not just another interface. All designers are striving to solving interesting problems where their work can make an impact. Despite it being something trivial as user interview or as exciting as blue sky exploration, they want to prove themselves through hard work. Respecting these values inspires them to do the best job of their lives. In our case, we decided to describe these values as our positioning and philosophy. To make it more tangible, we involved everyone from the team to create it together. Main ask that came back to me instantly was, there should be no corporate bullshit in the doc, only what we truly live by. So every freshman gets this doc as a part of their onboarding, but then it's supported with what they really can see on a day-to-day and while working in the team. So just the top 3, we collaborate, not compete. Once again, we're skill-based, not availability-based. We know our strengths and understand how can we improve. So this is our culture. A couple of last things on how to solidify. I think I'm over time, guys, but I'm not sure if I should continue. Browne, can you help me with that? Do you think our audience will survive another 3 minutes?
Yeah, why don't you give a couple more points and then wrap it up, because we've got a few questions here for you.
Sounds great, sounds great. So this particular point is about getting everyone together. Of course, in the current situation with quarantine, it is practically impossible, but I truly hope it will be through soon. In general, we are trying to encourage people getting together whenever they can, be it the start of the project, conference, or joint vacation. My own house in Amsterdam became bed and breakfast, thanks for the city being a popular destination. The rule is that you're allowed to travel and work from where the other people are. If there is no specific business reason, expenses are not covered, meaning accommodation and travel. But on the other hand, vacation days are not burned either, win-win. And people definitely enjoy going to Berlin, Paris, Amsterdam, and so on. And if you do not have a chance to bring all the people together in the real world, you might try another idea or another way. Here's an example on how we have managed to proudly identify ourselves as one team. These avatars were created for every team member and were used across all of the internal, actually, and later external social networks, Confluence, and other corporate accounts. It's a small thing, but it makes a big difference. And after all, it has become so popular around the company that we were constantly asked to create those for other people. Instead, one of our guys created a tool that lets you compose your very own avatar. And exposure in general, I think, is an effective unification tool, be it internal or external. And I noticed that unfortunately, as companies and as design managers, we all very often underestimate individual and team recognition. In our case, we try to recognize the value and talent of everyone on the team and would like to give them credit for what they've done. It was a massive fight for me with our HR and recruitment department, but nevertheless, you can live freely only if you're not afraid to lose them to recruiters or headhunters. And all of our guys, or majority of them, would have internal portfolios, but as well external ones. And be it Instagram, Dribble, Behance, or Medium, depending on what they want to communicate. I find it very useful because they can get feedback not only from the peers or the company within, but from the external world as well. So here's what I want to finish with. If you're really striving to have an effective plan for the future of designing an organization and understand what action to take today, I think you should step away from the routines and constantly get back to the whiteboard, analyzing and challenging every single fundamental approach to design ops and these 5 C's as well, to accelerate the growth and not just sustain success. So I hope some of these ideas that I share today would resonate with you, or on the contrary, will bring you to a different conclusion, how to make design ops work in your case. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Constantine. We've got a couple of questions here for you before we wrap up the evening. One, you started to touch on at the end there around working with recruiters or HR, but the question is about your hiring process. And were you hiring people, or was your hiring process centered around finding people who already had this mindset, or were you okay to train people to have this mindset once they were hired onto your team?
It is an amazing question, simply because I was growing with the time, myself, and especially this, once again, distributed factor learned me to rethink actually how the team should be built, like to have the right dynamic. And those are the points that I mentioned over there. But to answer your question, at the beginning, I guess, because I wanted to prove the point within the company and I wanted to really deliver. And the point was that we really need to have international team with different locations. That's going to be a success. Focus was on hiring rock stars. So budget, thanks to the successful industry, was not a question. Locations were plenty, and you could find talent from any different expertise you want. But very quickly, it proved to be a rockstar team with a bunch of very, again, kind of like selfish and egocentric assholes. So this is when I came myself to an understanding that I better find people that are ready and be open to actually, like contribute more on the soft side of things, not only kind of like with the hard skills and so on. So answering your question, at the beginning, not. Later on, of course, I started to think more about the composition, about having A players and B players, and actually having more B players because they help creating the stable foundation for the team. They are there for everyone. Hopefully, that answers the question.
And one last one before we wrap up here. And the question is about skills versus availability that you talked about. And the question is, how do you ensure a highly skilled design team member isn't overloaded in another time zone, especially if their stakeholders are in that office?
Yeah, so I know I just briefly touched upon that. Don't think that I'm insane. We came through that, through a lot of experimentation, and we were trying centralized way of running things, distributed way of running things, and all of them would have like pros and cons. So this skill-based, not availability-based thing is purely possible, like thanks to this hybrid structure. If you remember these three circles, what we would have is that you have a pool of skill sets, essentially. And everybody who is wearing a hat of a product designer would specifically get dedicated workload of 80%. We would realize, okay, that they need some extra time to actually be present and be available for these other engagements. It actually is a very helpful, healthy way of doing things, because people don't get bored at the projects or products that they constantly working on, and they have this rotation and they have different kind of things to try on. But to indeed ensure this insane planning, that's why we introduced design delivery managers. As I mentioned, it's like time, scope, and budget. So these guys were supposed to deal with day-to-day, but as well kind of like mid and long-term planning. So there was a whole, you know, back office operation going on around that.
Fantastic, thank you. And thanks to everyone who participated this evening, the speakers and everyone who attended. The chat was busy, so I hope you were able to meet somebody new and have a conversation. Me and my team are going to be thinking about the next event and what we're going to do. And with that, on the Meetup page, you'll see a Google form link if you would like to submit a talk to be a presenter at a future event. That's the best way to get quality speakers, is we want people who are eager to get up here and talk. So please do that if you've got an idea. So with that, Arnold, Mackenzie, Constantine, thank you. Stay safe, everyone. Good night, and talk to you all soon.